All right. It seems to be about time. I might be a bit early, but I might just start now while everyone's filtering in with a bit of an introduction to our event today before handing over to our panelists for their presentations today. So let's get started. Good morning, everyone. If you're tuning in from Malaysia, good afternoon if you are watching this from Melbourne. My name is Brandon Liew, and I'm a doctoral researcher at the University of Melbourne under the School of Culture and Communications. I'm quite pleased to be moderating this webinar discussion on Malaysian literature and the global literary market between our esteemed panelists, Amir Muhammad, Chong Ton Sin, and Raman Krishnan. Before I introduce our panelists today, I'd like to make a few acknowledgements first. Firstly, an acknowledgement of country. It might seem strange in this virtual space to acknowledge a physical place of gathering, but this year, both in Malaysia with the MCO and Victoria with the marathon lockdown, a lot of us have been estranged, disconnected, but also reconnected and renewed with our sense of place. And so with this renewed sense of place, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands we sit today. Where I am, it's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And as Indigenous Australians, they have been custodians of this land for thousands of years. And so I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Secondly, I want to acknowledge that this event is made possible with the support of the Art, History, and Curatorship Program, specifically the Asian Art Research Cluster, together with the School of Culture and Communication at the University of Melbourne. This event is convened by the Asian Art Dialogue, a collective of doctoral researchers, including myself, across the Faculty of Arts, Faculty of Fine Arts, Grimwald Center for Cultural Materials Conservation, and the Asia Institute, engaged broadly in the study of Asian art and culture. This will be our last event for the year, but if you are interested in some of our past work this year, please do get in touch and we will be happy to make them available for you. Finally, a couple of housekeeping matters. This webinar will run for just over an hour. Each panelist will speak in turn for about 10 minutes each before opening up to some further questions from myself and the audience. As this Zoom room is in a webinar format, there is no direct interaction between the panelists and the public. So please type out your question through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. I'll then be able to see the question and I'll endeavor to read them out to the panelists when we have time towards the end. Lastly, this event will be recorded and archived at the University of Melbourne. Pending the approval of our panelists, there may be a copy available for online viewing in the coming weeks. Now with all that out of the way, I believe we're just over 12 o'clock. I'm happy to just introduce our first speaker today. Amir, if you don't mind, in alphabetical order, you're first. So I'll introduce you shortly. Amir Muhammad is a distinguished filmmaker and writer, as well as the founder of the Buku Fiksi and Matahari Books independent publishing houses, established in 2011 and 2007, respectively. Together, they publish contemporary urban fiction and nonfiction in both Malay and English, as well as Malay translations of foreign titles. I could go on, but I'd much rather give the time over to you, Amir, to kickstart our discussion on Malaysian literature and the global literary marketplace. So take your time, Amir. I know you're coming straight from a film set, but please begin whenever you're ready.
Good morning. I'm here at an abandoned shop lot. So if you look around me, there are all these buildings. It's a big complex that has never been occupied in like several decades. I chose it because it's a metaphor for Malaysian publishing. No, it's not. I have to be here today. So thank you, Brandon, for inviting me, and thank you to the University of Melbourne. I've never been to Melbourne. So it's okay, but I'm sure it's a lovely place. So Buku Fiksi started out in 2011. So in the space of 9 years, we've published about 230 books, mainly in the Malay language. And the focus from the start, we said what we wanted urban pulp fiction. And our primary audience, even though we didn't really set out to have a primary audience, but it happened gradually after our 10th book, actually, that our primary audience is mainly college age students who read Malay. Yeah, that's kind of, it wasn't set out to be the target, it ended up being the target. And our best-selling book is called Asrama. It has sold 60,000. And our lowest selling book is is a translation of a David Cronenberg novel, which sold 800. So that's quite a range of between 800 to 60,000. And a few of them been turned into movies. I think that the thing I would like to share most is that there is no real like 5-year plan. Not even locally, let alone internationally. It is more like we take each book as it comes. We identify which writers are more popular based on feedback, and we encourage them to write more books. But we also are open to new writers as well. We have writing contests all the time. We've had 2 nationwide novel writing contests, and each we got at least 100 entries, people who took the trouble to write entire novels just for this contest. So our main challenge is just surviving, just keeping afloat. We have a staff of 12 people, full-time staff, including all the mandated benefits. And it is sometimes a struggle, but I'm glad to say that even this year, with all the challenges, we did not fire anybody, and we did not reduce anybody's salary or force them to, take unpaid leave or that kind of thing. So we find different ways of just strategizing, because the big blow this year is, of course, there are no book fairs, and book fairs were always at least 50% of our income, because they come and they see and they browse and that kind of thing. So we have learned so much about the taste of the young readers, and yeah, it's hard to say. For example, because we follow them on Twitter, we follow back all our followers on Twitter, like 100,000 people, and so I get to see from 2011 onwards what they're interested in. For example, like I learned first of K-pop from following these sort of accounts of fans, and then so we are in a position, I think, to anticipate what the next thing would be. So I would like to highlight 2 books this year. This was an anthology called 2020. We planned it last year, obviously, not this year, and it was released in January. And the idea was to get our English language writers, because about 10% of our 10 to 20% of our output is in English, to write short stories about 2020. Because in Malaysia, as I'm sure you know, Brandon, 2020 has been hyped before this as the year that Malaysia suddenly, miraculously becomes a developed country, diverse and tolerant and that kind of thing. And so we wanted our writers to respond to that idea last year. So of course, most of the stories ended up being rather dystopian, pointing out various failures of governance, of society to reach this kind of ideal. So the book came out in January. Little did we know that from March onwards, things became even more dystopian with a medical twist, pandemic twist. And as a result, the book seemed terribly outdated because it's talking about 2020, but doesn't mention what we're all concerned with now. So unfortunately, we ended up with a lot of unsold stock. We printed 3,000, which is our normal, and we only managed to sell 1,100, and then bookshops closed. So what we are doing, it's kind of odd. We're having like a clearance sale on our Shopee account, where we're actually giving it away for 90% off, which is the maximum discount you're allowed. So we're selling it at a loss, the remaining copies, and we've sold a few hundred already. But the good thing is that because I think we've built up a certain level of goodwill. People buy other books as well. They don't just take advantage of this ringgit offer. So that was one story of how a book, it won't be a profitable book, but it will at least, I think, break even because we've already paid the writers. And the other one is this book. It's like a pet project of mine. It's called The Malay Tale of the Pig King. It's based on an 18th century manuscript, which was kept at the British Library for centuries. And nobody had bothered to transliterate it into Roman text. It was written in Jawi, which in Indonesia is called something else, which is the Arabic script. So I hired somebody to do that, to transliterate it into modern, well, not say modern, but into Latinized text. And we published the original version 5 years ago, and thinking that because it's a public domain text, other people would do like, simplified versions or musical versions or movie versions based on it. But nobody did, even though the book sold about a few thousand, I think 7,000 copies. So we decided we will go ahead and do a children's version of this story about a prince who was born as a pig. And in order to fund it, because it's quite expensive to print, it's hardcover and full color, we had a crowdfunding campaign. The first time we've ever done it. And our target was to get 200 people to it's like you pre-buy the book. You pre-buy the book and you pay a bit more and your name will be printed in the book. And we were pleasantly surprised that in less than 3 days, we reached that target and we had to close the campaign. So this is the only book we've had that everything was sponsored even before it came out. So those are two I would like to highlight. The rest, I don't have them here, but this year we published the winners of our most recent novel writing competition. There are 6. Normally, because it's a competition, we would publish 5,000. But this year, because of the lack of book events, we published only 1,000 each. And they're going to sell out soon. So I think we will only reprint them next year for the book fair. So yeah, because I think ideas of what is local, what is global and all that, it's very big. And to me, I would rather concentrate on the day-to-day, what is the next book? How do we encourage new writers, which is important. But what's even more important is how do we encourage new readers? Because we need to develop those as well. We don't rely on governments per se, but if there are policies or if there are schemes that could benefit us, we will apply, I suppose. We take part in sort of events that they've organized. So I think that the philosophy is we want to publish many more books. It's currently about 235, I think, our total. And that's it. Is there anything else I should add? Our most popular genres are horror and thriller. And we divide them into categories. And one of the delights is that one of our most popular categories is called Mindfuck. And according to a prominent Twitter user, he follows our account for the pleasure of seeing hijabi girls in hijab, saying, this book was a total mindfuck based on our category, because that category was created because of this kind of reader feedback. So there are odd things like that. Sometimes people accuse us of lapsing into a kind of sensationalism. But I think Buku Fiksi was set up to counter what was then the dominant strain of Malay fiction, which is mainly romance-based. So nothing wrong with romance, of course. We all need romance in our lives. But I was just a bit puzzled why 95% of the titles on the shelf would be romance novels. So people who have criticized us would say that, oh, yet another fiksi book in which a girl kills her rapist. And then a reply on Twitter is saying that, but that's such a refreshing change from all these other Malay books where girls marry their rapists, which is actually a popular trope in Malay fiction here. So yeah, I think that's it for now.
That's great. Thank you, Amir.
Yeah.
It seems that you're really sort of on the pulse of the local sort of readership and demand. I mean, it's very impressive to achieve your crowdfunding goals in 3 days. It sort of shows, that you're kind of there and people are sort of interested in that, ground level one-to-one sort of way. Before I delve into too many questions, I'm going to move on to the next speaker for the day, and then we'll do questions at the end for everyone, if that's okay. So our next speaker is Chong. If you're ready, Chong, I'm just going to do a short introduction before handing over to you. So Chong Ton Sin is the founder of the Gerak Budaya Publishing House and SIRD, the Strategic Information and Research Development Center. Together, they have published critical alternative discussions in Malaysia for just over 20 years now, since their establishment in 2000. Chong was shortlisted this year for the Prix Voltaire, recognition from the International Publishers Association, awarded to those with a distinguished record of upholding the values of the freedom to publish and freedom of expression, despite pressure or harassment from governments and the authorities. So congratulations, Chong. So without further ado, take your time, Chong, but I'll hand over to you to begin your presentation whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Brandon, and thank you for the organizer to invite me for this panel discussion. Gerak Budaya and SRD is a two organization or two company in one roof. So Gerak Budaya mostly is trade, business, selling book, distribution book, and SRD mostly is a published book. But SRD is a publisher. Mostly the book is social science book, and Gerak Budaya they will publish some literature book. So our publication, the literature book actually not many. At the same time also we have the 3 language publication, English, Chinese, and Malay. So that is so every year maybe we only have 40 title, not many books. Okay, talk about the book business and market, global market and local market. Actually, I'm not the businessman, and I also don't know how to do the business, and don't know what's a book business from the beginning. From the beginning, we only think we want to publish a good book, the alternative book, the critical book for the reader. We want to publish a book, tell the truth. At the same time, also literature book from the, let's say, some history novel. So that's our aim from the starting. So it's not business only, not business, and then we do not business. So slowly, I'm slowly study about the book business, and then we are independent book publisher, and then of course very difficult. We don't have the big capital. We don't have the big money to run the business. So we are a bit difficult for everything. So, but unexpected, we have go through 20 years. We still survive. From starting, we think we very difficult to survive of this kind of book, but finally we still survive. This is very good. And okay, we choose from the starting. We think the independence is very important. We are not hope any support from the authority, from government. We call this independent. Independent, we are freedom. With freedom, we can publish any book we want to publish. Of course, our book, maybe some people, some, especially the politician, maybe they are not happy. And then the authority may be not happy. So, but we have to do this for our reader. So within 20 years, we also face a lot of this challenger and difficulty. Of course, I say the business is very difficult to do this kind of book. First thing. The second thing is we have some pressure from the authority, especially our social science book. So some book is banned, and then we also have some a few the 2 cases is still ongoing. So one is the Sarawak report, there is the Sultanate of Terengganu to sue us. The other one is the cover, the book cover, the rebirth book cover. So they come to investigate, but I'm not charged yet. Don't know what will happen. So in Malaysia, we have multicultural, multi-language, and multi-ethnic. So the literature book also divided by 3 or 4, Chinese, English, Malay, and Tamil. So the market is not so big and so a bit limited. Especially for me, I don't know. Amir very optimistic. Amir's book very good sell. But for me, our literature book very difficult sell, and then our social science book also not easy to sell. So in Malaysia, there is a limited the market for the especially the literature book, So and then we have two language. So the Chinese literature book, also in Chinese literature literature book and English literature book, but the government will have the policy for the culture policy starting from 1970s, early 70s. So they recognize the Malaysian literature book only with the language, Malay language. So the Chinese and English is not recognized. So we cannot get any adverse. So now the Chinese literature, Chinese writer, sometimes they are mostly they try, the good writer, they try to go to overseas, especially Taiwan, Hong Kong, and China, to get the recognition to publish a book. And then also their book, their work also published by the Taiwan publisher, the overseas publisher. So and then after the published by the other publisher, they come back to Malaysia, maybe they can sell more. The other thing is it's a big challenge for our local book or local literature book is our readers' concept. Especially in Chinese literature, they think overseas book, I mean China, Hong Kong, Taiwan book is better than local book. The quality, the writing, everything is better than local book. This is
Hello, Chong, are you still there?
Oh, I thought it was just me.
Let's give him a minute to reconnect. while we wait for Chong to sort of reconnect, and we might sort of jump into where he left off, we might move on to Raman first in the interest of time. Raman, are you okay?
I'm okay, but I seem to have lost my video. Let's see now where the hell, how do I might have to, do I connect again?
Oh, I can hear you quite well, Raman.
Okay, now I'm back. Okay, all right, I'm back.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. If it's okay, I'll introduce you. I'll just do a short introduction and I'll get your PowerPoint up. And if you're comfortable, we'll go through your entire presentation, then we'll move back to Chong when he comes back, if that's all right. Okay. So Raman obviously is the founder of Silverfish Books, a publishing house and bookshop established in Kuala Lumpur in 1999. Focusing on literature, philosophy, art, and Malaysian writing in English, especially local narratives and histories. I believe Raman will be speaking today on what he terms as Sunderland Publishing, and I'll be assisting him with a PowerPoint. So just in a moment, I'll have the PowerPoint open to share, but in the meantime, I'll hand it over to you, Raman, if you don't mind, while I get the PowerPoint ready.
Okay, thank you very much, Brandon. And good afternoon to those in Melbourne, and good morning if you're in KL. Now, this is an abbreviated version of a paper I've presented in several places, including the University of Melbourne in KL, and since 2005. Okay, here it goes. Publishing in Malaysia. It's complicated. Books are published in 3 major languages: Malay, Chinese, and English, and other minor ones like Tamil, Punjabi, and Malayalam, and all that. I mean, those are very small. Here below are some figures. According to the Malaysian Publishers Association, we publish 1 billion Malaysian ringgit worth of books in 2019. They'll come up to about 250 million USD. Okay, in 2014, the figure was USD 335. So it appears that our output has shrunk. I think this is a phenomena noticed all over the world, so we're not the only one. This figure would include books published in all languages based on ISBN registrations, but the breakdown is difficult. We don't know, but we can only guess that the bulk of the books would be in Malay, since all school books and most trade books are in Malay. Some Chinese, there will be some Chinese, and a small amount in English. Well, English would be the smallest of the 3 major markets. And why we choose English? Well, that's because we felt that we have to give the English speakers, English writers a voice. Large quantities of English and Chinese and English books are imported. Yeah? Now that's another problem. We'll come to that later. Malay books sell about 20,000 copies on average. But this is according to a paper presented at Frankfurt Book Fair 5 years ago. Chinese will be 5,000 and English 3,000. That seems a bit unreal, actually. The English publishing market is concentrated in the metropolitan centers like Kuala Lumpur, Penang, where English is used widely in commerce. Malay is the national language and has been the medium of instruction in schools for over 50 years. So most people speak and write Malay, and hence the size of the Malay market. Chinese writing in Malaysia has a long history dating back to the first decade of the 20th century. That means about 1910, I think that's when the first book came out. Works published in Chinese, English, and other languages are not considered Malaysian literature. They are just like, I mean, this is not uncommon. I mean, like even in Brazil, works written in Japanese are not considered Brazilian literature, although it's all about Brazil. But it's similarly, works written in Chinese, English, and not considered Malaysian And then there's another point I have to add is that there's hardly any translation of Malay works into Chinese and English, or English works into Chinese and Malay, or Chinese works into the other two languages. So we all live in separate bubbles. Okay, the next slide, please. Okay, English is not the first language of most people. This is a problem. First of all, English is not the first language of most Malaysians. It is often the second. That means a Malay speaker might go to learn English in school, and third or fourth languages, right? But this does not stop many people wanting to write in the language. Often this requires translated Manglish to standard English. Manglish is a term we use for a form of pidgin with many variations. There are many localized versions of Manglish. It's not one language. It is primarily mangled English. World standards. Now, English book buyers are used to international standards of writing and demand the same from local books. So you can't get away with just sloppy writing. We just cannot get away with sloppy writing. We have to compare the best in the world. English readers tend to be less forgiving, and this is probably true of Sinophone as well. Books from China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong must have set very high standards for local Chinese writers to follow. Censorship is not as bad as it sounds. I mean, everybody talks about censorship in Malaysia, but actually, yes, censorship, I believe censorship exists everywhere in the world. I mean, political correctness. What is political correctness but not censorship, right? Okay, here, porn is taboo. In Malaysia, porn is taboo, so is religion. Any book on religion is suspect, right? And no matter which religion, but I think Islam suffers the most. Apart from those two, anything goes. There is no approval required to publish a book. Anyone can publish a book, but after it is published, it might get banned, right? And while Silverfish had one book banned, after it was after 12 years in the market. We have absolutely no idea why it was banned, and we still don't know. Nobody's explaining, and nobody's saying. I mean, I think Chong would have had the same experience. The irony is that books in English appear to be less scrutinized than the ones in Malay. The English version of Canadian author Irshad Manji's book called Allah, Liberty and Love was not banned in Malaysia. But when it was translated into Malay, it was immediately banned. Religion is a sensitive subject, meaning English readers are not that important politics-wise in this country. So that's one good reason why we are probably sidelined. Okay, books selling in Malaysia, all languages. ASEAN. ASEAN has a population of 650 million people. It's bigger, twice as big as Europe, twice as big as US, half the size of China, half the size of India. And yet it's totally unexploited. Yeah? The region is culturally mature, sophisticated, with vibrant book markets in every country. Book industry has totally ignored the economic potential of this region. Thousands of stories wait to be translated and shared. It's an unbelievable opportunity for the book industry, actually for any industry. Yet, one will not find a single title from any of the other 10 countries in Sunda in any bookshop in Malaysia, and vice versa. You will not find a single Malaysian book in the Philippines, Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, any of those, not even in Singapore. We have become so provincial and so unbelievably, what do you call it, small-minded in this respect. We rather argue about who invented nasi lemak, whether it was invented in Malaysia or in Hong Kong, in Thailand or in Indonesia or Singapore, or chili crab. We'll have arguments about that. The Home Ministry maintains a list of titles that have been banned. This is regarding censorship. The list will consist of mostly porn and religion. Although once in a while you get books on breastfeeding getting into that list. And you wonder why. Was it because of the graphics? You know? Well, that's another point. But there's also another form of censorship. And this is what is the most, what should I say, it is arbitrary, and it's almost, this is the most annoying form of censorship, and a more irritating and a most dangerous form of censorship. The ministry officials or religious authorities often walk into bookstores and seize any book that they don't like. They personally don't like, even if it's not on any list, even if it's not on the ministry's list. And the bookshops and all the bookshops in the country will panic, because once it comes out in the newspapers, every bookshop will panic and they will pull out that particular author or title completely from the shelf. You know, and this is a sort of terrorism. I would say is literary terrorism. You know, there was once somebody in Alosa found a book by Salman Rushdie on the shelves of one of the books, and it was not even on the list. It was not a controversial book of any sort. All it said was Salman Rushdie on the cover, and every bookshop in that chain pulled out every Salman Rushdie book from their something like 36 shops, and they have something like 36 shops in the whole of Malaysia, and they pulled out every single copy of it. And that's a completely arbitrary, and that's terrorism. You know, that's literary terrorism. Okay, this is more dangerous than the censorship. Most ministers won't have the testicular fortitude to denounce this random victimization. You know, they wouldn't dare speak out against it. The offending title would be subsequently banned to rationalize the raid. Then there is this cartel. Okay, now this is what I was speaking about in the beginning. See? First of all, English is not the first language. It's a second, third, or fourth language, and we have all sorts of problems publishing in English. But second of all is that our entire industry is controlled by a cartel of publishers from the UK and the US. 50 years after independence, and we are still controlled by foreign interests. After the Brits, okay, this cartel was formed during the colonial era. A handful of book distributors representing large UK publishers totally controlled the English book trade in Malaysia and Singapore. After the Brits left, these companies were Malaysianized, but continued the practice with American titles added. Strong arm tactics were often used to control shop space, prices, and decide what bookshops could stock and what English books Malaysians could read. They decided it. I once remember when I first opened the shop and there was this distributor rearranging my books. I said, "What the hell are you doing? This is my bookshop. I choose the books I want to sell." And he was totally flabbergasted, but this is how it's done everywhere. So they just walk into bookshops and then put their books on the shelves. And so it was a bit shocking. It was a little shocking, but I realized that this is something which has been going on for decades, and so they just cannot get out of that habit. Books from Australia, New Zealand, and India are still excluded because the distributors will not stock them, and so they are not found in Malaysian bookstores. Unless, of course, they're published. Okay, if Peter Carey gets published in the UK, he's called a UK. It is from the UK publisher, and he gets into that channel, not because he's an Australian. After borders collapsed, thousands of remaindered books from the US have flooded our shores, depressing our local trade even more. I mean, it's already bad enough trying to sell English books, and then we have this tsunami of remaindered books from the UK and the US, and not Australia, okay? Our small print runs, because our market is small, our print runs are small, the costs are high. And so it makes it even more difficult to compete against this large, the cartel bookshop publishers who print in thousands of millions. And then there's UK and US also play a closed shop game. See, when I try to sell a book rights to them, they say, we want your market as well. They want the Malaysian market. They don't want to open up their market. Okay, this next slide just gives you an idea of the book, the current book trade, which is a virtual invasion from UK and the US. It's all one directional. Okay, we go to the next slide, and this is the book trade inside, within ASEAN, or I prefer to call it Sunda because that's more inclusive. Okay, within ASEAN is political, and Sunda is not. Now, there's none, zero book trade within the, and you look at the next slide, what the potential Asia-Pacific trade, as I see it at least, is that yes, there is a healthy trade inside ASEAN, and they can market to any country, and any country can market to them. So Europe, China is a huge market. They're voracious. They buy books like hell. Japan, US, Australia. Now, Australia is also excluded from this market, and that's bizarre. You know, if you look at it anyway. So the
Raman,
current situation.
As we go to the next slide, we can wrap up in 2 minutes.
Yeah, I can do that. All right, the current situations that, well, the US-UK market is in decline. And they blame everybody. I mean, they blame the ebooks, they blame the book, you know, but the basic problem is that they have got no new talent, no new ideas, and no new directions. But there are thousands of stories are waiting to be exploited in Africa, in Sunda, and the rest of the world. They are still so provincial, so parochial, that they refuse to take risks. They're so risk averse that, so now what happens next? So what we do need is, it's quite obvious. We need stories, new ideas. And where are these new stories and new ideas are they going to come from? To me, well, Sunda is very, very rich. It's got 650 million people. It's got a healthy economy, and it's right next door to Australia. Are you going to exploit it? And it's also next door to China, right? If Australians don't take the advantage of this, China will. So in any case, we have to start. I mean, this is where, for me, this is where we start. Of course, some people might prefer Africa. That's great too. Okay, that's all I have to say. And by the way, the type of books we are into would be exploring Sunda folklore. So this is the second book in the series. And we won, the first book was called Bidasari, which is actually a Sleeping Beauty story, which originated from Malaysia before the Europeans stole it. And Disney had turned it into a singing teapot event. And Bentala Naga is another Sunda story. And for many scholars think that the Atlantis story originated from Malaysia or from Sunda land, this region. And when I say Malaysia, please don't think about the political entity, which is Malaysia now, talking about the whole of the Malay land from stretching all the way to the Philippines and Java in the south. So that will be, well, we cannot depend on the market, so we can only depend on the mission. Okay. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you very much, Raman. I've just had this very strange image of, you know, someone coming into your bookstore and, you know, not figuratively arranging your books, but literally arranging your books in your bookstore. It's as you describe it, it's a very neo-colonial sort of book cartel. In the interest of time, I'm just going to move back to Chong. You were cut off, unfortunately, Chong, in the middle of your presentation. If it's once you're ready, if it's all right with you, we can try to resume that.
Sorry, just saw the technical problem. So maybe I will add in something only, not many content.
Don't worry about it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So just the other problem we face is not only the law or something or ban the book, this is a big pressure. Also, sometimes the authority to go to the bookshop to harass the bookseller, the bookshop. Say this book don't sell, that book don't sell. This also, and then the bookshop they do a business, so they are a bit worried, so they don't sell the book. This is also the thing. Nowadays, the social media also is the one pressure. Let's say recently the book cover. Actually, the book cover is no problem. But in the social media, many people talk, wow, there's a problem. So it becomes the pressure to the government, to the authority to take action to investigate these cases. So this I want to add in something. Another thing is, I think just in the future, the book business is more and more difficult, and not only because this year because of the COVID-19, giving the heavy smash for us our business, but not only that, the book business for my kind of book is more and more difficult in the future. So we also now you see we are publish more and publish less, and then the printing also the print run also less. So the book price may be higher. So that's a thing. Before we print 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, no. Now maybe we only print 500, no, 500, 300, 600. That's a difference of the before and now. And then we hope the chain bookshop, the chain bookshop, they can recover their business. Maybe we can sell more books. If their business cannot recover, we also difficult. Online, yes, online is the way to try to settle our problem, part of our problem. But online only part of the problem, part of the function can help us. But we try to do that. So in the future, for us, we will really struggle for survival. And then one day we'll see what will happen. Now we still have 12 staff, and then we already very sorry. We already not like army very clever, very good businessman. And then we are cut salary, sorry. So and then can we stand for how long we don't know yet. So this is something I want to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chong. Yeah, I've been personally keeping up with the book cover controversy, right, with that censorship. And I think that speaks to very much what Raman has said, how these sort of censorship, not even policies work, but there is no sort of outright banning from the government, but rather they don't really intervene. When someone wants to pull out Salman Rushdie, everyone pulls Salman Rushdie out. Or when someone on Twitter is in disagreement with something like one of your book covers, then all of a sudden there's this big swoop coming in. So that's also very interesting to note. Now, though, I'd like to move into, I can see we're getting a few questions from the audience. So I'd like to move into Q&A time. And if you're in the audience, you can ask questions through the Q&A function at the bottom, and I'll be able to see them and read them out. So I might get started by throwing all three of you a sort of a broad question on the Malaysian book market since 1999, if that's all right. So the Malaysian critic and poet Wong Pui Nam, you might know him, argued in 1999 that writers in the UK and US enjoy access to a highly developed literary infrastructure and reading markets. But in comparison, the literary infrastructure in Malaysia is sort of a backwater and entirely out of orbit to the US and UK. So to what extent do you think that the literary infrastructure in Malaysia, so publishers, universities, bookshops, libraries, have developed since 1999, so in the last 20 years? And also, do you agree that local writers need to be connected to this sort of global orbit of the US and UK to thrive? I know Amir mentioned very early on a lot to do with writing competitions and his success with crowdfunding. So I'm very interested to see, in the last 20 years, what has the development in the Malaysian book trade been?
Should I start? Okay, go ahead, Raman.
If you like.
Well,
okay.
who's speaking?
I can start first. Okay. My stand is that nobody owes you a living. So we can complain about the lack of infrastructure, which of course it's a problem. And even though volume of Malay titles has been quite big because we have all these book fairs, but there's not much variety. There's certain dominant genres, certain dominant approaches, including conspiracy theories and so on. So I admire the people who are trying to do something different, who are trying to create their own market in whatever way. Most of them use social media. And when it comes to writers who go overseas, I think it's pretty much up to the individual initiative of each writer. For example, Hannah Alkaf, who has had 2 books published overseas, she did it all by herself. There was no government assistance whatsoever. And she was, she persevered, approaching agent after agent and so on. And also, I think also it's part of our neo-colonialist mindset that we assume that a book that sells 1,000 copies in the US means your international level, whereas a book that sells 10,000 copies in Malaysia means, oh, poor thing, you're such a local name, whereas the numbers will say otherwise. So I'm very interested in Indonesian publishing. Some of our books, we've sold the rights to Indonesia, and we've bought rights for more Indonesian titles where we adapt the language a bit, and those did quite well for us. And next year I would like to visit the Dhaka Literary Fair, which I've never visited, but which I've heard wonderful things about. And I would love to publish a Bangladeshi novel in Malay, because Malay people look at Bangladeshi people almost every day. There are a lot of our migrant workers are from there, but in a kind of I would have to say in a kind of a new kind of colonialist kind of view. People see Bangladeshi workers as not fully developed in terms of their stories. They're there just to serve you. So sometimes we complain that the whites are oppressing us, but then we also do the same things to people who are here. And Bangladeshi literature, of course, is very developed. It has been thriving for many decades. And I'm in touch with some people, and I would love to go there. And yeah, to me, that's international. If I can get a Bangladeshi work translated here, and maybe vice versa later, to me, that's good enough. That's international. Yeah, not everything depends on what the US and the UK are reading.
Okay, can I come in?
Thanks, Amir.
Yeah. About the infrastructure since 1999, of course, it's different. Of course, it improved. But we have they say the more the book fair, the KL book fair every year once. Okay, at the same time also, the Besar Buku from Popular Book, starting there's a Chinese book fair, very big book fair. But now they also add in the English book. So that's also a chance. And the other one is alternative book fair. Alternative book fair is not big, but very meaningful. So the book fair is the infrastructure for the book business. The second thing is before we have long time before we have independent bookshop, but after that we have chain bookshop, because the following by the shopping mall, built up. So there is chain bookshop. Chain bookshop is more. Let's say Popular MBS, they have many outlets in the shopping mall. Then also can help the book business to distribute the book. Business go everywhere, and then more people easy to buy the book. I think this is infrastructure. And then, of course, you say university. If you compare with before 1999, of course, more university and private university they build up. They also have the book business to grow up. That's my view. Thank you.
Thanks, Chong. Do you have anything to add? Sorry, Raman.
Well, okay, I can see. I go to Frankfurt every year, or I've been going to Frankfurt for more than 10 years now, and or maybe 15 years. See, one thing I noticed: you go to an American stand, and they will tell you they want to show you all their books. But when you suggest, would you like to see some of ours? They say, no, we don't buy, we only sell. They tell you straight in your face, right? And so they are so like, I had this conversation with the chairman of the Frankfurt Book Fair. We'll be having dinner once, and I happened to be sitting next to him. So I said, yes, that's the problem. He says trade is a two-way traffic. It's not one way. But unfortunately, for Americans and UK, it's one way. They only sell, they don't buy. Whereas in Europe, Europeans, if you speak to the European countries, they buy and sell. So, and sure enough, in these last 15 years, the size of the so-called English-speaking Anglophone stand at Frankfurt has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. Because the only way a book industry can grow is by cross-fertilization. You have to buy from others, and others have to buy from you. I mean, like if you look at Shakespeare, come on, who did he influence, and was he influenced by? It was not always that way. You know, now Borges has influenced a hell of a lot of people. Rabelais has influenced Shakespeare. I mean, so it is always been a cross-fertilization. Unfortunately, in recent years, they've become more and more insular, and they have stopped producing new writers. Come on, Salman Rushdie was in last year's Booker Prize nominee. What the hell are you talking about? You know, are there no more young people there in that country with any talent? Or have they all migrated to Netflix to produce shows or write for shows? You know,
Yeah.
So, but this is an opportunity. I mean, this is a downside of the UK, US, but it's also an opportunity for the rest of us.
From what I can see, I think what all three of you have in common is that focus, or to put in your terms, sort of cross-fertilization lately on the region around Malaysia, as you put it, Sundaland, as Amir was talking about, looking at Indonesia and translating, Bangladeshi literature, and so on. I just want to seek into a question from someone in the audience, because I think it's a very good contrast. They ask if they are wondering if there's anything that we could glean from Singapore's literary marketplace, bearing in mind there are differences in socioeconomic and linguistic privilege, of course. And I think this goes back to what you were saying, Raman, in that sometimes you wouldn't even see a Malaysian book in Singapore, in a Singaporean bookstore, even though it's there is so much shared history, and it's proximity-wise it's right next door. Do you think that these nations in Southeast Asia are still parochial instead of sort of looking towards that cross-fertilization?
You want me to answer that? I say, are they parochial? Yes, they're parochial. But at the literary level, at the writers level, at the publishers level, we all love each other. We get along fabulously. But as the policymaker level, they do not encourage that. In fact, they do not. I mean, I've dealt with so many of these these Singapore High Commissioners in KL, and we always talk about, hey, look, why did you bring your writers over? Sponsor them. Why didn't you get some of our writers over there? Oh, they say yes, 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 and then it dies. There's no cultural exchange. There's too much of pettiness. There's too much pettiness and petty jealousies.
What about book fairs and book markets? I mean, you just shared your experience with the Frankfurt Book Fair, which was a fairly negative experience. Whereas Amir was speaking earlier that about 50% of his income comes from book fairs and, you know, that physical setting up and people browsing your stock and people getting to know you. So what about book fairs and that's those sort of events and that sort of promotion? What has the response been there in terms of not just, you know, in Malaysia, but in the areas around Malaysia?
Well, as far as the KL book fairs, I mean, Amir is talking about KL book fair. It's basically a Malay book fair. So Malay books sell in that fair, but not Chinese books. No, very limited quantities of Chinese and English books sell there. It is a very parochial event for me. I'm not affected at all. It doesn't affect me in the least. I cannot sell any of my books there because none of the people go to that book fair speak English. So there's no promotion at cross-fertilizer. In Malaysia, like I said earlier, we do not translate Malay books into English or Chinese, or no Chinese book and Chinese and English books into Malay. There's no, I mean, this is one country, you would expect them to translate one another, but no, nothing. We live in different bubbles. Okay, there's a Chinese book fair, Chinese people go there. You know, there's no English book fair actually, except for the KLAB.
It seems to me there's this sort of cathartic bubble that's been happening since the 1940s in terms of like literary history, especially, you know, the beginnings of Anglophone Malaysian writing with Ng Mal Chin and that university writing, where they saw this challenge and they sought to address it. But it seems like we're still stuck there, you know, like 60, 70 years later. Just on that, I want to seek into another question on language, and particularly how, you know, literatures in Malay, Chinese, and English are affected, the book markets, how book markets are affected in relation to language, and something we brought up earlier, the national language policy and the national cultural policy. So since 1971, Malaysian literature has been institutionalized into national and sectional categories. So national is anything defined as anything written in Malay language and tradition, while sectional is anything written in any other language, right? Although national contexts have changed since then, it's my understanding that this policy is still in effect today in 2020. So my question is, in what ways, if any, does the policy on national and sectional literature affect the Malaysian book industry or your businesses today, either directly or indirectly? And further from that, how distinct are the book markets in terms of language, you know, Anglophone, Sinophone, Chinese language, and Malay language books? To what audience do they cater to? I think Chong spoke a bit on this earlier about Mahua in Taiwan, especially, and how people will get published overseas just for that recognition to be able to sell at home and so on. But before I get ahead of myself, what do you think about the national policies on language, and to what effect do they have on you and your book selling business?
Yeah, I think policy-wise, you will get all kinds of benefits and highlights, I think, if you write in Malay, because it's national language and so on. But as Raman said earlier, a curious kind of exchange you make in return for not publishing in Malay is that the authorities don't hassle you as much. So you can get away with a lot more. So you have more freedom in exchange for the government not looking at you. But why would you want the government to look at you in the first place? And that is true of all activities, not just books. For example, a filmmaker like Nemui, who is very popular, made a name for himself in Taiwan and so on. Of course, officially, he's not considered kosher at all. But he doesn't care. He does his own thing. He doesn't send to the censorship board, and he's built up enough of an audience overseas. So no Malay language creator I know has that kind of freedom, maybe because it's a kind of coddling thing. You live in this kind of paternalistic situation where your father provides for you and all that. So there's less effort to be adventurous, maybe. And to quote the late Saleh bin Jonid, who studied in Australia, Real writers don't care about labels anyway. Real writers will just write. If not for this generation, then the next. So yeah. To comment on Singapore, the government there is much more proactive. Like they acknowledge 4 official languages, and they give out prizes of equal amount, I think, to all these 4 languages. But the reverse of that is that the general Singapore public does not read Singapore books, even though they are of very high production quality, very high editing quality. They look gorgeous. A lot of the writers are from Oxbridge, so they know how to use commas and semicolons and so on. And some of them are very good, like Alfian Saad, Harish Sharma. These are amazing writers. But there is much less awareness. It does not pervade the general consciousness. I think the only series that did that was a series called True Singapore Ghost Stories, which was, I think, an 80s thing where, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Singaporeans would have read it. But the more highbrow literary thing is kept very niche, and they depend a lot on government grants to publish, to print. So to the extent that if the government grant is withdrawn, they are not able to print the book. So also it's a kind of compromise. You get great looking books, good production quality, but it does not matter to the mass Singapore public.
I see. Do you think the reverse is true in Malaysia? I'm not trying to say anything about Singapore, but do you think, that the reverse is true, is that there is I suppose, demand and passion for books and for reading literature, but, without that sort of support and sort of grants and prizes and that sort of thing from the government?
Well, the grants and prizes will tend to be for the sort of respectable Malay language books, whereas
that is very controlled, as you said.
Yeah. So if you write in like slang, if you don't even not belong to this sort of literary fraternity, you don't get this kind of awards. But who cares? We're not looking for them anyway. As Princess Diana said, we want to be the queen of people's hearts. It's a gratuitous reference to the crown. Yeah.
That's great. If I could pass on to Chong shortly to comment on Sinophone or Chinese language books. Do you find any specific challenges in publishing in Chinese in Malaysia?
I think Chinese literature and Chinese publication, Chinese publisher is this long term. They have their own system. They have their own business. This long term already. So now it's still continue. So I think the Chinese market, Chinese book market, still their own, and then not big affected about the language. That this national culture policy for this Chinese language book, and then but the thing is now the Chinese reader is less and less. It's probably not like before, no, and then only Chen bookshop they have the Chinese bookshop, Chinese book, they sell the Chinese book, and then also the few independent. Before, the many independent bookshop in everywhere, every town, every small town, medium town. Nowadays, they're very less. Only the Chen bookshop have. So, but also the other thing, also the problem is the concept, the mindset, the concept. Same thing. They say the Chinese book all come from China, before it come from China, after it come from Taiwan, the quality is better. I mean the content and then even the everything is better than local. That is the problem. So some local writer also go to Taiwan to publish a book, I say. So this mindset, I think have to, this concept have to change. If you can change, then maybe they will help the local books selling. Sell the local book market. I think that's the thing. Thank you.
It's a very strange inverse relationship you're pointing out, where you say people who read Chinese books in Malaysia prefer to read Chinese books from Taiwan or China because of that perception that they're better, right, if they're from overseas, and therefore Malaysian writers will publish in Taiwan in order to be part of that. But it's also my understanding that the Chinese book markets in Taiwan and Hong Kong and so on. Also, I suppose, read or cater to Chinese Malaysian writing, right? As you pointed out in your presentation, Mahua, right? That genre. So Chinese Malaysian writing is its own genre in Taiwan of Mahua. Is that right?
Yes, but the other thing nowadays, the other way, to write the local publisher, they sell the right to China and Taiwan. Let's say if one is a book and local book can sell in China, I think they will sell many copies. But the thing is also same thing. China people and Taiwan people, why they want to read Malaysia book. So and then they also think the Malaysia books is nothing, so they wouldn't read. That's also a problem. But if you can some let's say the children book or something, or some literature book, they sell the right to China, then they will sell many copies. This also the China or China or Taiwan, they can sell many copies. That is a way to how to split out our literature to overseas.
On that strategy, maybe I can pass over to you, Raman, on any particular challenges in publishing in English, or if the policies on national literature affect you directly or indirectly.
Well, as Amir pointed out, see, we all work around the rules, and you see, like, although English is not recognized as a minority language, it's not recognized national, but they sort of grudgingly have to admit that English writing has reached international levels. So they have to grudgingly admit that, and of course they might hate it, but they have to accept that. So in a way, they do accept that, but then you see the advantage, of course. You see, like, you're talking about Singapore. Now, it's interesting that in Singapore, if you write in Malay, they don't care, because Malay is a minority language there. They really don't care. I've translated books by Isa Kamari, fascinating books by Isa Kamari, but in Singapore, they don't care. He was hardly selling in Singapore because he was in Malay, and so the government didn't really care. So in Malaysia, it's the reverse. Because if you write in Malay, they care. But if you write in English, they don't care. So it's a sort of, you write in a minority language, you don't really care. In a way, it's good, they keep out of your hair, but that doesn't stop people from walking in. You stop, two people walk in and what's he looking for this time? But they don't harass me as much as, I suppose, a Malay bookstore or bookstore selling Malay books.
It's very strange. You pointed out, someone from the book cartel, as you described, probably just coming in and rearranging your books. But you might also have someone else from the government coming in and rearranging your books and pulling stuff off the bookshelves and so on.
Sorry, I lost you.
Sorry, Raman. I was just commenting that you said, early on that you might have, someone like a publisher or your distributor coming in and rearranging a bookshelf. And you might also have, someone from the government or an authority coming in and pulling stuff off your bookshelf.
I'll turn off the video.
That's a bit better. I suppose I wanted to ask, since we're on this topic of, we sort of go around the rules, right? As independent bookshops, the rules are there, but we very gracefully navigate our way around the rules. Was that something that all three of you were always aware since setting up your publishing businesses 20 years ago? Or is that something that you sort of learned along the way, that it's best to, to sidestep the rules and try to survive and go around them and sort of be more focused on, as Chong said, publishing good books, good critical books, instead of trying to define who you are?
I think any Malaysian will know that there are rules and they are just ways of conducting your life. And the two need not intersect. You learn this from a very early age, where you will see people selling pirated DVDs next to a police station. And this will go on for years. So from an early age, we understand that the unwritten rules are what really function in society. So yeah, of course, you can be a victim of these rules, but most of the time, most people know how to work around them. Yeah, like for example, our driving is terrible, so because people ignore the written rules often. Yeah.
It seems to me that you only get targeted once you sort of step on their toes, and by toes I mean you sort of encroach on their control over Malay literature and Malay language, right? Chong, with your example of your books being banned, but also Raman's example of his translations into Malay being banned, whereas in English or Chinese they're sort of ignored and not really looked at. Do you find that that's the case in terms of censorship?
No, for me, because our book may be more controversial, so the few English book also banned. But also funny also, just like the Raman say, you see, we have the book, Life at River Flood. That's a book talk about the Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore women, the struggle. English and Chinese should be published long time, and then we sell many years already. When we translate to Malay language, we also sell few years. Finally, they ban it. This one thing. The other thing is that not my book, other people's book, about the communist Malaya, but in the many picture book. Chinese publish already, no problem. When they publish a Malay book, they ban it. So I think maybe they want to control the Malay's thinking or Malay's knowledge, But I don't think that they can achieve their aim, because nowadays many middle class Malay, they also read English. The Chinese maybe less. So that is what we face it, But the English book, I say not only ban the book, they go to harass the bookshop, don't sell the book, And they make the fear for the bookseller. Thank you.
It seems to me that even despite these challenges of policy in terms of the national cultural policy and national language policy, all three of you have seen some degree of success in publishing your works, and also to sort of in cultivating the local book market. I think Amir, like your example is kind of highlights that, right? Your crowdfunding, and you are, I think you said earlier that you have no real sort of 5-year plan, but you're sort of focused on the next book. And so that's a very sort of hungry passion I can see there. And that I think seems to pervade or seem to work or be part of all of your successes. I'm not sure if you agree, but I feel that despite these challenges and despite sort of knowing the rules, but also working a way around them to publish genuinely good books seems to be the philosophy here. Just throwing it over to you, Raman. Do you agree that?
Yes, I mean, I have to agree with you there, but let's say that we're not thriving, we are surviving.
That's right.
Right? We're basically just surviving, and this downturn has not, well, it's not made it better, but it has not made it terribly, well, it's not made it worse, actually. That's definitely not made it better, right? I suppose more people have time during MCO to read. So, in fact, the sales of internet sales or online sales have actually gone up in case of Surat. Not a great deal, but it's gone up noticeably. And even people who drop into the shop to buy books has gone up a little bit, because I suppose people are bored and they want to read something. So let's say that one redeeming factor or one redeeming point of most of the Malaysian authorities is that they're terribly inefficient. It took them 12 years to read my book to decide to ban it. And just as Chong said it took, what took you so many years to read the book? You know, or maybe they didn't read it at all, but somebody just bitched about it, and so they decided to ban it.
I'm just going to seek to a question from the audience. Just off what I was saying earlier, someone asked, well, what do you think a good book is? It's a very vague question, but in that sense, what is a good book? Or what are the sort of books that motivate you to survive, as you put it, year after year?
For me, I feel a bit left out because I've never had a book banned. So I feel that is my one regret in life so far. Even though there have been some that shops refuse to sell, but yeah, no actual bans yet. To me, to be honest, my biggest thrill is when I search Twitter and I find people saying that they would read fixie books in their boarding boarding school, in residential schools, and they would always get confiscated by the prefects, by the teachers. So fixie books are the most confiscated books in secondary school, boarding school. So to me, that is the greatest accomplishment. I can't ask for anything more. And someone from the National Library also told me fixie books are the most frequently stolen books that they need to always replenish. So I'm very proud. I'm very proud of both of those. Better than any award or so on. Yeah.
Okay, for me, a good book meaning the book tells the truth. The book tells the truth, or even the story, the true story. So, and then the book keep the reader the information, good information, to let them have the more knowledge. That is a meaning good book. And then some book, because it's more controversial. Controversial, that means there is a critical, there is something untold story inside there. So that also considered good book. And then that kind of book maybe can sell more. So if you don't publish a good book, then I don't know what's the meaning of the publication. Why do we want to do this book business or this publication? So that's so long, so far we do what we do. Thank you.
I suppose it's my turn now, isn't it? For me, okay, if I'm writing fiction, well, I've been really taken aback, I'm really surprised at how many of my authors are actually colorblind. You know, and in a society like ours, and that I think is the most, I mean, is unbelievably, rewarding, to see how my authors, no matter what they are, whether they are Malays, Chinese, Indians, anybody, they are colorblind. They treat characters as characters. And so you can actually identify, you might be a Chinese character, but a Malay reader will also be able to identify with the feelings and the emotions. I also print history books. By history books, well, history books are not really, actually more fiction than facts, but never mind, let's leave that behind, because that argument can go on for years. But I also publish history books and also books on current affairs and politics, and I avoid religion because only certain type. I mean, I really not interested in getting into that, murky waters. But I like what I look for as a publisher is authenticity. Is the experience authentic? Yeah. And I love the way they tend to be. I mean, they can be colorblind about it. Thank you.
Those are really good answers, and I feel like we can have another whole webinar series on authenticity in Malaysian books. But I'm going to leave it there at the moment. On that note, I might just end with a last question or two last questions about this year. So looking towards the future. So as we know, the COVID-19 pandemic has presented a huge challenge for small and homegrown businesses. And in the last hour, we've heard a lot about how all three of you have operated this year, and some of the good and some of the bad that's resulted as a result of the MCO and so on, with the book fairs being cancelled, etc. So are there any other specific challenges that you faced this year as an independent local publishing house? I mean, aside from Amir, I'm sorry to say, your 2020 book published in January. And also, adding on to that, to end with, in one sentence, if you can you tell us, why does it matter that we take local publishing seriously in Malaysia?
Okay, I think the challenge for us is now more reader, they read, but they not read the book. They read in the internet, read in handphone. So the handphone or internet and social media take the reader more time. So there's no time to read the book. That is the big challenge. Because the handphone and other things, the technology is more and more advanced. So this is the one challenge. Okay, so the one sentence for me, I think is publisher have to support the local writer. At the same time, the writer also have support the local publisher. Thank you.
Well, I'm afraid I have to differ from Chong on that. A book is a book, and it doesn't matter if you read it on a mobile phone or on an ebook or on PDF. The medium doesn't matter. The story is still the story. Now, we have to find ways of translating our stories into mobile phones or into tablets or into EPUB. So we need to, we have to stop being lazy about it, and we have to find, how do we get our books onto mobile phone screens? If that's what they look at, that's what they're going to read. And so I do not differentiate books by the, just like there's a hardback and a softback, ebook is just another one. So I'm afraid I cannot agree with that. And that is, but the other thing is that we have to keep on looking, we have to keep on working, and I feel we have to develop the local stories. We have neglected our local stories. There's so many local stories, and we have just neglected them. And I think we should stop being lazy and start doing work. That's all I have to say.
And the work that you're talking about is that putting local stories out there, or giving them a platform to be seen, to be recognized?
I beg your pardon?
The work that you're talking about, is that giving local stories a platform to be sort of recognized?
The work I'm talking about is, the last two books I published, okay? Nobody in Malaysia, or very, very few people in Malaysia, had even heard of them. So it takes a lot of research. You spend plenty of time in research to present them, right? And who else can do it but publishers? We have to, that's our job. And the other thing is to transfer all these stories into platforms which are read by young people. Young people like to read on their phone. Fine, let's make a phone serialized version on phones.
It seems as a very sort of proactive way of translating mediums almost. Just to end on you, Amir, is there any other specific challenges you faced this year? And why do you think we should take local publishing seriously, if not take you seriously?
Well, what is life without challenges? So my one sentence is, what is a nation if not the stories it tells itself? Yeah.
What is a nation? Well, that's a question, but it's a very good question, isn't it? If not the stories, it tells itself.
Yeah.
I think all three of you have given us a lot of food for thought today, and I'd love to carry this on and on. But I believe we're a bit over time, so I might have to end our webinar there today. I'd just like to thank all three of you again for giving us your time and engaging us in this lovely conversation. It was very illuminating. I also like to thank again the Asian Art Dialogue and the Asian Art History program at the University of Melbourne under the School of Culture and Communications for supporting and putting this event on. And obviously, I'd like to wish all three of you the best into the new year. As we come into Christmas and the new year, we'll keep in touch and we'll keep each other updated.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Amir, Chong, and Raman.
All right. Thanks. Thanks.
Bye bye. Thank you.